All right, guys. Today we are gonna be reacting to Andrew versus feminist debate. Does narcissism actually exist? Let's jump in.
Has anybody at the table ever dated a narcissist? Yeah, now suddenly not, right?
I think I
guess you should ask
have.
that
I
first.
think I have.
You think you have?
I think I have. Yeah, but like you said, like you can never officially tell, right? And I think women do, or people do over-diagnose, but also narcissistic people kind of never get really diagnosed because they don't know that they are or don't think that they are, and they would never go to therapy to be diagnosed. So I think those are two kind of reasons. But I don't. Yeah, you're right. I think you can never be sure.
I mean,
you know.
possibly. The big problem that I have, though, is that many of the traits which are considered narcissistic by women in modernity are often conflated with things which are just confidence, assertiveness, not putting up with things that they don't like, or having standards that they want adhered to. Those things are also desirable traits. And yet, oftentimes, even though those are the traits which attract women to that man in the first place, later, after the relationship has been resolved, they say that, oh, I should have known those were narcissistic traits, which is, that's I guess, the bizarre part to me. It's like, oh, the guy you said, for instance, Rachel, you said, I dated a narcissist. When you think about those narcissistic traits that you now look back on and say, these were signs of narcissism, weren't those similar traits to what attracted you to the guy in the first place?
Good point.
No, because it doesn't show at first. It just starts showing up kind of in a sneaky way, and then it's like there's more and more gaslighting, and there's more and more like criticism, and then it just becomes more and more as you go along the relationship. And at some point, you kind of like you start doubting yourself so much about kind of everything, and you erase yourself. But at the beginning, you don't. It doesn't show as confidence or anything like that. It's
Well, what
I
does
don't
it show
think
as?
that's it. At the beginning, it doesn't show at all.
Yeah, but what was this guy's narcissistic trait?
Just like constant criticism, you feel like you have to walk on eggshells. Like everything you're going to do is going to be wrong. Everything you're going to say is going to be wrong. He's going to kind of freak out about every little thing that you say.
Those could apply to
That sounded a little bit of projection, huh? Right? A little bit of projection there.
a narcissist, but they could also apply
Well,
to someone who's not
gaslighting,
a
controlling, like he needs to control the situation. It needs to be like he wants, and like let's say there's a double standard as well. Like he makes a joke, and if you make that joke, then it doesn't,
All of those things, which I agree probably aren't desirable characteristics, can still be held by people who are not narcissists.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I said you can never really know.
Well, I think you can know. I think that you know by having a diagnosis by medical professionals who work with these people for many years before they make such a diagnosis. But even then, I guess maybe an olive branch here, maybe you can't ever know, because even diagnoses between psychological professionals tend to differ when it comes to individuals because of how complex it is. So one psychologist may say, yes, that's a narcissist, and another one says, no, it's not a narcissist. It's because we're talking about human behavior, the scientific method often goes out the window, right?
Yeah, and narcissism apparently is the hardest thing to diagnose. And narcissist people are very, very smart and very manipulative. So apparently, that's they can fuck up with the actual psychologist or a psychiatrist.
I'm not even sure it exists. I'm not convinced that the actual condition of narcissism exists any more than psychopathy exists. I mean, psychopathy is completely made up. It's not in any psychological handbooks, not in any of the DSMs. It's just never, we made it up, right? We made the entire, people call each other psychopaths all the time.
All the time.
It's not even a diagnosis.
Everybody call everybody psychopath. If you are kind of crazy, they call you psychopath. Your crazy ex-girlfriend, probably a psychopath. I mean, we say that all the time. I mean, but at the same time, we do have some diagnoses for certain behaviors. Am I wrong on this? This is not my expertise, all right? And nor I claim that I am an expertise when it comes down to these topics. I'm just a regular dude here, almost at midnight, reacting to these videos because I like to watch them. I just simply like to just share my views. I'm not a special guy, but common sense comes into play when we're talking about this. Not everybody, but there's times that you call crazy people psychopath, right? So you do have an idea.
Condition. It's like we just made it up.
I guess
And
it's
yet
just like,
people that, like, how many of you didn't know that? How many of you didn't know that we made up psychopathy? We made up psychopath. That's a totally made up diagnosis. How many of you knew that?
Wow.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's completely fabricated. I mean, I think it's fun to call people that, right? I guess. Oh, that guy's a real psycho. But that's not what they call. They call it, it's a personality disorder. They have different names. You might refer to that as some form of psychopathy, but there's no actual diagnosis for psychopathy.
I'll take that, I guess.
So yeah, it's hard for me to believe some of these kind of widely used diagnoses like narcissism. I'm not even sure if they really exist.
Wait, so none of y'all have dated a narcissist, really? None of you? Come on.
I just said I think I did.
I think so.
Okay.
Nope. I don't think so.
No narcissist? Yes?
That has narcissistic tendencies, yes.
Okay.
But there's a difference if you have tendencies or you're, like you guys said, are actually
Tendencies.
diagnosed with it.
Yeah.
Or the next one, the last option could be that you are simply projecting insecurities in order for you to cope and not to distance yourself from that projection. You call people narcissists.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the bothersome thing, right? It's like narcissistic tendencies means what?
Exactly.
So I did some research on narcissism. There's two types of narcissism. There's covert and overt.
No,
And-
covert narcissism, and there's actually 6 different kinds.
Okay.
But covert narcissism is under the umbrella, and it's widely disputed by psychologists if covert narcissism even exists, or grandiose narcissism, if that even exists, right? So that would these are umbrella terms, but again, it's very difficult to get to specificity when you start to dive into it. You start to find out, well, it's a lot more vague than you think.
I think it's important to do research on these, I guess, diagnoses, and before you choose to self-diagnose or diagnose someone else without a medical professional. But it can help you be aware of what's going on with that person and why they have these tendencies. Like, for example, like I feel that narcissists lack empathy. So it's the difference between the overt and covert that I was mentioning is overt is the grandiose narcissism. It's very outward projection, whereas covert it's harder to really spot because they don't really need the praise from society. It's more, I guess sneaky is just like an easier way to put it. And I do feel that overt narcissism is like the embodying of grandiose behaviors and thinking that they are better than others because they have that lack of empathy, but they also can be very charming because they put on some sort of...
What in the hell is this lady talking about? She just basically got me confused now. She got me confused. I don't even know what the hell she's talking about.
facade.
Yeah, let me try to give you like maybe a different take here. Well, I was in a shop one time, and I was welding something up, and I looked up, and a guy had put a drill bit through his hand, and he was screaming, and it was bleeding everywhere. And all of us stopped what we were doing and started laughing. Of course, we went over and we were helping him while he was screaming, but we were laughing hysterically while this was happening. Does that show a distinct lack of empathy? Right? I think it does, but I think that when you're talking about masculinity and you're talking about how men behave, we're not supposed to be overly empathetic. We're not supposed to be that way. That's not what we're designed to do. We're literally designed to go out and kill large animals, right, and feel nothing. We're not supposed to care about Fluffy. We're not supposed to care how Fluffy looks. We're supposed to care how Fluffy tastes. And so what happens, I think, is...
Look at the narcissist lady that like to... I mean, look at the person here. The lady on the blue. They like to date narcissists. Look at her reaction when Andrew says that.
How Fluffy looks. We're supposed to care how Fluffy tastes. And so what happens, I think, is this kind of great conflation where because women are very empathetic to each other, they think that men, in turn, are also supposed to be very empathetic. Men are not empathetic. We're not empaths. We're not supposed to be empaths. That would be very bad if we were empathetic, in fact. That would be the opposite of good. And we wouldn't have been able to hunt very well, for instance, right?
Conquer. I'm just bringing it up to that perspective, right? Conquer. We like to conquer. We like to compete. Although we have some rules, right? But yeah, when it comes down to the real raw nature of man, right? We are very savage, folks. We are very savage. We have a monster that need to be, let's put it this way, a monster that need to put, and I would say a monster that need to be educated. Right? When we argue about values and morals, it comes even from a place that is not even abstract. I mean, concrete. It's an abstract concept. That's why we have religion. That way we can. Religion is basically a way of controlling the master. Right? It's a way of controlling the master. And that, I think that's where Andrew's coming from.
I don't believe that
Let me know what you guys think.
narcissism is directly associated with gender or masculinity or femininity.
True.
I don't think that laughing at the matter at hand it's like the direct example of a lack of empathy, as what I was relating to with narcissism. It's almost, it feels very fake when they do the display of empathy, because they have that lack of depth when it does come to their empathy, and they will make it more obvious.
Many men have trouble conveying, for instance, and women too, right? So this argument would be used right back against you. Many people just have trouble conveying empathy. It doesn't even mean that they're not empathetic. They just have trouble with it. Or they're not particularly wired to be empathetic. Men especially are not wired to be empathetic. We're not supposed to be empathetic. We're supposed to have barriers and guards from empathy for a reason. Men who are designed from the biological perspective to protect the tribe, they're going to have to kill other men.
There we go.
Right? That's what they're wired to do, to kill other men. If they're wired to do that, how much empathy should they be bogged down with? Probably not much, right? Probably not much.
Damn, she got on. Look at that.
There's a difference.
This is why Andrew is very good. He literally made them realize how raw the man nature is. Think about it. He's saying that if you have to protect your family, the place that you live, and somebody's attacking you, right? I'm just sort of like saying what he was trying to say. And that person want to delete you. Were you supposed to feel empathetic if you are gonna about to delete him? I guess so, in some ways, right? But then you have to decide between you, your family, and that guy. So the concept of empathy has to go out of the window, folks. And when he put it in those words, this is when females they start really thinking like, hold up, what are we doing here? That's my opinion.
Between outwardly showing that you lack empathy and kind of embracing that quality about yourself versus lacking that empathy and making it as if that you have this empathy. And that's why I said that narcissists tend to be more charming people, because they fake that kind of empathy.
Yeah, but think about what you're saying. Imagine that you're in school, you're a young man, right? And schools are mostly overwhelmingly run by women. And most of the policies are implemented by women. You tend to see young women do really well in school and young men not
100%.
do well in school. Men are penalized for things which we consider to be just fine. For instance, if a man gets up in the middle of class and drags another guy outside and beats him up, we don't really care about that. We don't consider that to be a big deal. And we never did. Even in the United States, the idea of like you punch somebody in school and you went to jail or you got suspended or expelled, that's a new thing, right? That's a new thing. So when you're talking about like rough and tumble play, things like this, imagine being in an environment where you're told that you need to be empathetic all the time. You're following a different set of rules which are designed not for your sex or how you're designed. It would be very easy for you to fall into the pattern of faking things like empathy in order to keep the people around you happy, even though there's absolutely nothing wrong with you having far less of it or not expressing it. Does that make sense? Yeah, like when you were in school, when you guys aren't that removed from high school, who was more likely to get into fistfights, the boys or the girls?
Boys.
The boys, right? And how often were they able to become friends
Hey, we got it.
after they
Come
got in a
on,
fistfight?
Brian.
How
Come on, Brian. Let him cook.
often were they able to become friends afterwards?
Very likely.
Guys do make
Means-
out like easier, make up easier. That is
Yep.
true. Usually when girls are offended by each other, there's usually like a lot of toxic emotional behavior thereafter. So I do agree with that.
Yeah. So what happens is that men kick the shit out of each other all the time, and we just don't see a big deal with it. And we're not very empathetic about it, and we usually laugh hysterically at the guy who's on the ground and then pick his ass up and brush him off. Like, that's how we do things. Women, they don't do things that way. They're looking for empathy, things like this. But I don't really see why men need to necessarily live in a woman's world where we have to kind of pretend that empathy is this kind of primary edict, because for us, it's just really not.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, at the same time, you don't want to be an a-hole, right? You need to have some basic moral, and that way you can help people. You don't want to get to a point where you have no empathy. You don't want to help anybody. But I think that's where the concept of generosity comes into play. Right? It's good to be generous, I guess. Yeah. Very good back and forth. Let me know what you guys think. I will see you next one.